True. Unsolved murders. The Keddie murders is an unsolved murder case that dates back to 1981, in which 4 people were brutally murdered in Keddie, California. The murders took place in Cabin 28 during the late evening of April 11th, 1981, and or the early morning of April 12th. The victims were Glenna Sue Sharp, who went by Sue. She was 36 years old. Her son John, who was age 15, and his friend Dana Wingate, age 17. At some point after the crime was discovered, Sue's daughter Tina, age 12, was determined to be missing. Her skull would later be discovered along with several other bones in 1984 at Camp 18, California, which is in Butte County. Sue's oldest daughter, Sheila, had been staying with the next-door neighbors in Cabin 27 that night. She was the one who had to discover the murders on the morning of April 12th. Sue's 2 youngest sons, Greg and Rick Sharp, ages 10 and 5 years old, and their friend Justin, who were having a sleepover at Camp 28 that night, were found uninjured in the boys' bedroom that morning. No arrests have been made in connection with the Keddie murders. Several buildings that had eventually been condemned, including residences 27 and 28, were demolished in 2004. Sue Sharp and her 5 children had been renting the cabin since November 1980. On the night of April 11th, Sue was home with her 2 youngest boys and the friend of the boys, Justin, who was staying that night. Greg and Rick apparently slept through the murders, and Justin, who was only 12 years old, was the only known witness, and his accounts were unreliable because after several attempts to get his account, even by lie detector and hypnosis, his story would consistently change. Tina returned home from an evening of watching TV at Cabin 27 around 10 p.m. Sue's oldest son, John, and his friend Dana Wingate had spent the day in nearby Quincy. They were planning to return to Keddie in order to sleep in John's basement bedroom. John and Dana were last seen walking along State Route 70 near Quincy. The crime may have already been in progress when they arrived at the cabin, or they may have heard a disturbance while in John's downstairs bedroom. At approximately 7:45 a.m. on the morning of April 12th, Sheila Sharp returned to the cabin from the sleepover next door and discovered the bodies of Sue, John, and Dana in the home's living room. All 3 victims had been bound with medical tape and electrical wire. Over 22 feet of medical tape was found on these bodies, while no medical tape was known to be in the house prior to the murders. After some initial confusion about whose bodies were in the house, Plumas County Sheriff's deputies later determined that Tina Sharp was missing from the cabin. Found near John's body was a flimsy table knife, while a bloody hammer and a 7-inch butcher knife were found on a nearby table. Upon examination of the bodies, it was determined that each of the victims had been bludgeoned with claw hammers of 2 distinct sizes, and Sue and John had been stabbed repeatedly, including slashes to their throats. Dana Wingate was manually strangled to death and bludgeoned with another weapon. It was found that Sue had been bludgeoned with a Daisy Powerline rifle brought by the killer or killers. 1 pellet fired from the rifle, along with several pieces of the barrel sights, were recovered at the scene, but the rifle itself was never recovered. A bloody knife was also among evidence found in a trash bin at the Keddie General Store. As some cases do, this case grew cold. Until 1984, the cranium portion of a skull was recovered near Camp 18, which is about 29 miles from Keddie. Months later, after an anonymous call to the Butte County Sheriff's Office, the caller claimed that the skull was Tina's. The Camp 18 area was searched again for several days. A jawbone and dozens of other bones were found, along with other potential evidence. The bones were later confirmed to be those of 12-year-old Tina Sharp. From these discoveries, no new information regarding the crime surfaced in the media, although the Butte County Sheriff's Office released both the original and backup copy of the auto recording of the anonymous phone call to an undisclosed member of law enforcement. Both recordings were released to the same person at the same time, and somehow they both disappeared. The murders remain unsolved, although the case is currently being actively pursued by members of the Plumas County Sheriff's Office. On March 24, 2016, a hammer was taken into evidence that matches the description of one that a suspect, Marty Smart, claimed was missing 2 days after the murders. Plumas County Sheriff Hagewood stated, "The location it was found, it would have been intentionally put there. It would not have been accidentally misplaced." Unfortunately, at the time of the murders, the Sharp family lived in an area surrounded by drug dealers, child molesters, corrupt cops, corrupt businessmen, transients, and at least one known serial killer. So while there were several suspects, no arrests were ever made. Because of the discovery of the hammer in March 2016, this case is now getting a fresh review. But as of now, this brutal murder of 4 people, including children, is unsolved.